Alrighty, we are back, and I'm in my house, and we have all three of us. It's a very exciting day.
What a treat.
Yes, not leads into our topic of travel ball insanity, not having been home for so long, but it feels nice to be home and on a somewhat regular schedule, although in about 30 minutes I'm headed to local games, but it does feel good to be back and to be chatting with all of us today. So we were going to just touch, obviously, so we are in early to mid-July, so everyone's kind of nearing the end of their travel ball season, which is like almost funny because I feel like I've lived a whole life this summer, and yet it's only been 3 tournaments, right? Oh my gosh, yeah, I think 3 tournaments. That is ridiculous. And you know, I think coming from our side, obviously I've been coaching, but then on the OGX side, where we, you know, talk to a lot of different athletes from lots of different teams, of just the sort of like overwhelming feeling of exhaustion at this point of the year. And I think not necessarily related to physical exhaustion, although there is that too, but just a feeling of you know, mental, emotional exhaustion as well. I think, you know, my team's goal has been to make it to 727. We reference that a lot, which is the final 8 of the Alliance National Championship. And I still think we can make it happen, but it feels like like you're climbing up a mountain more lately. Like, you know, the reason we set that goal was to be peaking at the right time frame, but you know, the reality of that is so hard with the structure of travel ball and what these girls and families are asked to do. I really felt that in Colorado. So I think you guys can share some of the more player development feedback that you've gotten, but we only played in the regular Colorado tournament. We were there for a week. By the end, I think everyone was ready to be in their own bed. And there were teams that they added the weekend before that or the week before that. So there are people that had been in Colorado for 2 weeks. Yep. And I just think the reality of like how that impacts the athletes, you know, we just ignore that way too much, I think. It's just like, it's a lot. It's very taxing. We're taking away a lot of their social identity. You know, we're having them sleep in hotel beds. Everything becomes about, like, even when you do social things, I felt this with my team. I was trying to make it not feel quite like this, but it's like, even when you do social things, it's about team bonding, you know? It's like has this underlying expectation of what it's going to be instead of just like sitting around chatting with your friends. So it's a lot. It was a lot for me, and I'm a grown adult who didn't play. So I think, you know, we're definitely seeing some ramifications of it now. So maybe you guys can talk a little bit about what you're seeing more from it could be, you know, pain and injury, which of course comes up now, but, you know, some of the feedback we're getting from other athletes and their experiences this time of year.
Yeah, Ash, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think this is probably the second or third summer in a row where I have referenced, like, to me, the season is over after Colorado. And the reason for that is because it doesn't matter who our athletes are playing for. Doesn't matter where they live across the country. There is just this overwhelming, like, I guess you could say, like, blanket of exhaustion. And, you know, they say things like, you know, I'm just trying to keep on trucking and, like, trying to, like, it's not like a complaining they're coming at it from a complaining standpoint, but there's just this overwhelming, like, they're done. This idea of, like, performance is a joke at this point. So we're just trying to, like, help them stay afloat. And if stay afloat is just, like, hold on to the bottom tier of what performance looks like for them, maybe holding on is just, like, keeping them out of pain and injury these last couple of weeks. What the athletes look like when they come into, like, physically, not all of our athletes train in person, but what our athletes typically look like when they come in after Colorado is like a shell of themselves. I mean, you can see it in their faces. Their velocity is low. They don't even seem to be upset about velocity, which is really telling. Because it doesn't matter if a kid had a flu for a week the week before. If they show up the next week and their velocity is down, they're like, what's wrong? You know, I mean, velocity is like such a triggering concept. But when they come after Colorado, their level of exhaustion is so high that they're just like, yeah, that makes sense. It's like they just like surrender to it finally. I think, you know, for the majority, I don't even think it's necessarily just the states who have high school in the spring, because our athletes that are in Georgia, they're equally as exhausted because their spring season in travel ball is crazy. So I definitely think there is this like, it's over. It's over. And so the reality is, and I don't think this is the first time we've talked about this, the tournaments are driven by business, people, and revenue. And so 2 straight weeks in Colorado, and that's not even your nationals, is like, and then 4 days later, you have to turn around and play again. I mean, I've just finished doing like some check-ins with some of our athletes across the country on Tuesday and Wednesday, like, how is your body feeling and recovering after Colorado? And they're like, today I started to feel a little bit normal, but I play in Atlanta tomorrow at 8 a.m. It's just, it's a lot. It's really a lot. So I think just as long as I have felt like, you know, we're in a bubble. So I definitely have felt like our athletes every year, they do a better and better job, which probably means we're doing a better and better job of educating them, of keeping them focused. Like they write on Monday, like, this is my soreness level. Here's my fatigue level. They're filling out wellness questionnaires. Like, I think I might try plyos only, maybe not until Wednesday. They're not freaked out by like, I'm not going to throw until I just do plyos Wednesday and I have a game Thursday. Like they're starting to understand how to like prep for performance while also preserving their health. I think this summer I have felt the best about that, at least from a pitcher world at OGX. And so that's great. And Laura, you can weigh in on that a little bit more, but performance wise, it's done. It's done. And so I think just like for all, at least the OGX parents we deal with, they seem to recognize that. They're basically like, oh, she started to struggle at the end of Colorado. But like, basically she must feel 10 times worse than I feel. So like, no chance I can expect her to do anymore. I definitely feel like the parents, the OGX parents are starting to understand that. I don't know if that might be a bubble world. That might not be what people think across the board. And I would just think like, I hope college coaches understand that, because yeah, there's an element. And I know that the season weighs heavily on all athletes, but I obviously am always a little bit biased in my thought processes towards pitchers, because there is no one on that field that is being asked to do what pitchers are doing. That is a position that is beyond grueling to be able to be asked to produce max power, pitch after pitch after pitch, feeling the way that you do. So I just think like, yeah, it's worth, I don't necessarily think like this is not, I don't feel like angry about it. I don't feel like this is like, let's take down the system. It's just a reality of it. And I think the more that we talk about the reality of it, the more that expectations become clear for parents, for athletes, of like, hey, if you're in July and you're still somewhat in range of what you're typically doing, if you are feeling at least like healthy, there's not pain, like maybe we have some excessive soreness, you're understanding how to take care of that. It's a success story. We're not talking peak performance. We're not talking anything like that. So I think it's more of just of like, are we all on the same page that that's what we're talking about? Versus, a couple summers ago when I would get some calls or texts from some college coaches, like, I went to see such and such and she was only throwing 60 miles per hour, not 65. And it used to like infuriate me. Like, what do you want from that kid?
What do you expect? Right.
Yeah. What do you like? Give me a break. Like, it's just like at some point, this is ridiculous. So I think I haven't heard a lot of that. So I don't know. Maybe we are all starting to recognize a little bit. Krista, I know you got some feedback this week from college coaches that they were like, they need a break. They are standing and watching the games and they need a break, right? And so maybe there is some element, parents who are sitting and watching the games need a break. And so I think there's an element of, I think, again, we live in a bubble at OGX, so maybe this is just my perspective, but people are starting to recognize like, all right, expectations have got to shift. We see where we're all at. So I don't know, Krista, if you think that's true or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's an element, and I've been working on some things in the background, which I don't know if they're going to happen, but there's an element of like, we have to play more regionally. I mean, it's just crazy how much this feeds into so many things. It feeds into physical and mental exhaustion of the athlete. It feeds into less performance. It feeds into the pressure. I mean, I know what I spent. I had to submit for reimbursement. You know, I've probably spent close 8,000 already on travel.
The accessibility of the game
that I can get reimbursed. That's not including food, gas, like, you know, the types of things that I just have to pay for on my own. But like of the things I know I've submitted, air flight, rental cars, right? All of that, you know, by the end of the summer, I am certain that I individually am going to have spent between like around $12,000 on travel for the summer. And I think there's an element of you want to know why everything is so charged. Well, the stakes are very high, you know? I mean, people are paying a lot of money for this, and so they expect to get something out of it. If the promise of 2 weeks in Colorado is I'm going to hand over 10K, but my kid's going to get recruited, then they expect their kid to get recruited. And when they don't, you know, the stakes get high, or they think that's the stage their kid needs to be on for prepping for college, and that looks a certain way to them, so the stakes are high. Like, I think it's very obvious to me that the more we've moved into this world where someone who is supposed to be being considered as a national level, so a high performer, the only schedule that's supposedly acceptable for them to play is this very national schedule. And I think, you know, it's tough. It just, I think you're setting yourself up for a lot of bad things, and that got driven by, you know, capitalism. I'm going to get to the deep business and why we do that, but I think that like it just doesn't work. And what's happening is we've slowly pulled so many teams that consider themselves into this level of travel, which probably is beyond who should even be doing these things. And then now the region, it's kind of like rec. Now the regional tournaments stink. And so you're like, well, I can't play in that. I just go hammer everyone there. What's the benefit of that? Like, we've created this insane cycle instead of just like, let's all just stay regional and then it's good. And in reality, like for my team, who's mostly based out of Chicago, in reality, the large majority of my athletes are going to go to a place that's driving distance from Chicago. Why am I going to Colorado to get them? Not Colorado is a little caveat, the normal Colorado tournament, because, you know, I think if that's all you did, you would love it. But like Atlanta, you know, wherever else we're going to, why? You know, I think, and I get it. I've chosen that this summer, and it's felt like what our team needed to do to play their level of competition and to be challenged. But I think it starts to get really tricky. It's like the slippery slope. We've created a very similar world to what we created in rec ball, which is like, okay, but now if I play at home, well, that stinks because the competition is not good. They all left to go play this tournament, so now I have to leave to go play this tournament. And it's just this weird cycle. And I just think it's bad. I mean, I think it's bad. We're seeing the impacts of it. I just don't think there's a lot of, yes, they're playing a high level of competition, but as really not great versions of themselves. So the one thing I was talking about yesterday with James, our strength coach, is I've been really impressed with my team's sort of dedication to training, and you know, they lifted in Colorado when we had time. They, you know, we've kept up a lot, but our team and the way it's structured is mostly kids who have to maximize themselves to be able to perform at that stage. They have to be at the top of their game to compete with the person across the field from them, and they can do it. And it's, when it happens, it's like my favorite thing in the world, which is like this kid who didn't, you know, was average is now standing across from the top recruit in her class who's going to, you know, a top 5 school and winning. Like, it's literally the best thing. And I think that teaches some really, really amazing things, but it's very hard for them in this structure. And it's hard to like explain to people that, like, they're like, well, that team's fine. I'm like, actually, that team's not fine. But all of those kids' floors is so high because they just, you know, genetically and sort of naturally are at a higher level. And so when they show up as lesser versions of themselves, yeah, they still, you know, can do some things. But I know, but that's not the best version of them. And we see in college what happens to a lot of those kids, that when they then are just in an environment where it's all that type, they might underperform and things like that. And I definitely felt that with my team in Colorado, which is, it's hard. It's been harder and harder. It was harder and harder at the end of Colorado for my athletes to like tap into, you know, the adjustments and changes they need to, because they're tired. And for them, that makes that environment feel even more challenging, I would say, than someone who just comes out a pitcher that just throws, whatever, naturally X, and her body build is whatever, and it's just easier for her to do those things. So, I just think for a lot of reasons the structure is crazy. I think families feel tired, not just because they've been on the road for so long, but because they see what's happening to their bank accounts. I mean, it's real. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and they're away from work. The tournaments start on Thursday mornings at the latest. It's Thursday right now. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm leaving in 30 minutes to go to a tournament. So I just think, and that's late. That's a later start than we've been playing, So I think it's tough. I think we have to do some real soul searching. I don't know how you overcome this except for, I think when college coaches, kind of what you said, I think this a lot. And I'll see this sometimes on social media that a college coach will say, we're not going this weekend. Our staff needs a break. And I think that's great, but maybe when you make that choice, really think about that, and maybe these are the conversations we should be having at NFCA, and really trying to stick with them, which is which the fall recruiting has come up of really think about, if you guys stop showing up, that's who has the power. If you stop showing up, then we can start having conversations around this. Or if you say, I'm only recruiting regionally because those are the kids I go to. And so if you want to play here, stay regional. If you guys start speaking up, then that power dynamic shifts. So I just would really push that when you're thinking about how tired you are, maybe we should take some action around that. It's just how I feel.
You guys know I have a zillion thoughts on all of this. I see it so acutely with the pain and injury stuff that we deal with. Whether it is a spring season athlete coming out of high school, beaten up, bruised, just trying to hang on for dear life to their arm health or their body health or their sanity. It's just this rat race that I think sometimes they don't even know what they're chasing. I don't even think they're just so in the, we have to keep up, or we're being driven by an organization or a coach or a tournament or an opportunity that just drives the bus, and no one is stopping to think is this in the kid's best interest, right? Which is a hard decision. And I don't envy parents that have to make those decisions. That's a difficult thing to, decide to miss out on those things if you feel like they're going to provide your kid an opportunity. As we get another summer into this cycle, and I agree, Ash, we've done such a better job of educating, and our athletes have done a better job of being honest with us about I'm exhausted, right? I'm just trying to hang on. I know this isn't ideal. I'm going to play through pain. I know that's not what I should do. Can you help me? Right? And so they're at least reaching out instead of just dismissing the opportunity for some support in that. Do I love pitchers pitching in pain? No. But is it a reality? Absolutely. And so we got to live in reality. The thing I find so interesting about the college coach conversation is, in the world of youth sports, these kids have become a commodity, right? Let's just be perfectly blunt. They've become a commodity. Commodities get exploited. That's what happens again, we can go down the capitalism route. And so if I'm a college coach and I am recruiting an athlete, have one of my commits is playing for an organization, I want to make sure I'm protecting my investment. And I want conversation with, what is her health? What's her performance? What role does that travel organization, that coach, that whoever is training her, what role are they taking in keeping my commodity healthy and performing? And I think that is a piece of this conversation of not only do the college coaches need a break, but they also want to make sure that the recruits they're going after and their commits are arriving to their campuses in their best versions of themselves. And to be honest, a lot of those freshmen don't, because they're going to play all summer. They're going to be handed strength programs from their colleges, from whoever, or not train at all and show up in August in whatever version they're going to be. And so I feel like there's just this twofold conversation of everybody needs a break, and we can do this smarter. We can do this more efficiently. And I think it just takes some breaking some of these ways we've always done it, which we know is a very, very dangerous phrase in any business or organization. The other way I see this manifesting is in actually some of the sales calls that I've had, where parents have asked okay, you guys write a program every 4 weeks, so like we just stop that when it's like summertime, right? And the opportunity to educate those potential clients of like, no, let's talk about why it's more than just a program for 4 weeks. Let's talk about why we adjust to those things in season and out of season. We are expecting our youth athletes to travel and perform without the resources that we're giving to college athletes. And those high school athletes they're not mentally, emotionally, physically prepared for all of that yet, nor do they have the resources to spend 2 weeks away from home and then be expected to perform their best, right? They don't have a strength coach with them on the road. They don't have a nutritionist. They don't have a mental coach. They don't have access to a strength training facility other than their hotel weight room. And we're saying, oh, but go out and perform your best, right? So all the stuff that we work with the college programs to make sure that on the road and when they're in the midst of their season, are giving their athletes the best opportunities, we just throw our hands in the air and say, oh, well, youth kids don't get it. That's not, you won't get that until you get to college. But you have to go out and perform your best without those resources. And it's conflicting to me. I don't understand the cognitive dissonance around that concept.
Yeah.
Laura, I think that's a great point of like where when we feel like some of our most powerful work is in the management of athletes while in season. I think that's a great way to really put it, is like as if you were a college athlete and you had no strength coach, you had no AT, right. You had no one overseeing anything. You were just expected every day, whether there was no one to report to, if your hamstring felt a little funky, if all of a sudden and you just were going and going and going, and being asked to perform. Like no one would do that in the college world. You're absolutely right. And so I think where we really, in addition to obviously like off-season training and planning and understanding how to use data to measure and make sure that, growth is actually happening, it's not subjective, et cetera, our team's ability to keep them connected to a strength coach, to keep monitoring whether or not they're losing strength, stability, power, to keep them connected to you from a health and wellness AT standpoint of like when something flares up, how do we squash it before it keeps building chronically, to have basically a pitching person be able to, or a hitting person, but specifically pitching because of volume, like help them design what they do in their weeks leading up to based on what they did the week before. Oh, you didn't throw it all? Okay, so then you can probably handle XYZ this week. You threw a ton. Here's what your plan needs to be. This idea of that's the management. You're absolutely right. I think that is where every time someone says like, we're busy playing, we're going to pause, we're like, oh, it always like gets us so much. I would rather someone say like, we're taking a month off because we don't want to do anything in softball and we don't want to do anything softball. It's December. We're celebrating holidays. Like we just like need a break. I would be like, gotcha. Like makes total sense. But it's when it happens in high school. It's when it happens in, the middle of the summer that I'm like, no. What we always say is like, I hope she makes it out. Like, she's going right back in this pool of having no oversight and help with the management of all of these pieces. So it's a lot, and no one is equipped or has the level of expertise. Their parents, the teenager does not have the ability to like manage this themselves. So I think you're absolutely right about that. The other thing I was thinking is about the call that you had the other day where I thought we were done with things like this. This is the OGX bubble where I'm like, we've evolved beyond this, right? No. Where the same strength and conditioning program was given to the incoming freshmen as all of the returners at a Power 5 school. And that makes us like, I died a little inside because it's obviously geared toward, I want to make sure you're not just doing nothing all summer. So it's a ton of conditioning. First of all, you could argue like right energy system, probably not. But
it was a 6-day-a-week program because again, built around the college athlete with Sunday off. Well, that kid in the middle of travel ball ain't getting Sunday off anytime soon. So there's just a disconnect of those
probably
things.
is getting Sunday off because
it's just a little
she's exhausted,
get knocked out,
and loses. Yeah, but I think it's more of a like, if you don't have that level of thoughtfulness about like, yes, let me hand this over to my senior who is coming in the fall, right, without thinking like, well, this doesn't work for her, and this won't work for her, or this isn't appropriate.
who's going to follow it blindly because that's what they feel they're expected to do. So like, I don't fault the athlete. I don't fault her at all. She was handed something from her, her program that said, you need to do these things. And so she did it. And so the end result of that was, one, we have been helping her to manage some arm issues that strength programs that fatigue her like that are not helpful for. And then two, the amount of conditioning that's in there, plus the fact that she is still playing. It's like she's exhausted. Her movement quality has just absolutely tanked. And it's like, wait a minute, your head coach is expecting a different version of you in August. And you are going the wrong direction right now. It's not your fault. It's not her fault. It just is such a mismatch of understanding what these kids go through this transition of spring to summer.
I think also to this point of like, should the athletes at this age be in an environment that require the only way for it to not unravel would be as if they were traveling around with a strength coach and a pitching coach and a mental coach. Like, I think that's the point is like, I 100% the only way that you could actually create this, like, I think, the only way this would be manageable for me in a better way would be like, if this was my full-time job, if I got paid a full salary and I coached this was my job and I built a staff and we did this. Is that right though? These are teenagers. So I think there's an element of like, that's the problem is the only way to do it. Like, we're like, okay, be with OGX and then just stick with OGX and let us build a system around you. Except there's the reality of like, well, that can't be right. That's the only way that you can be in this structure because now the accessibility is even lower and it just feels insane. And I think, listen, this is not to be, I think our players are amazing and this is not to knock things, but USA just lost twice to Japan. I think like the way we talk about the USA elite, so the level under the national team, the way we talk about, that a lot of these player development conversations have ultimately come up and changed. And we talked about this, Ashley, we talked about last week when we were talking about the rules, like we've talked about this before, is that people sit around and they say, we're not performing on the international stage the way we think we should be. And I think like that time is here. I mean, that time is here. We have what seems like the greatest athletes in the world, college at its highest level, and those same athletes going internationally and losing. Like, the time is here. We need to be united in what we're doing. If we want the game to sort of stay in the Olympics, if we want the international game to be strong, like a lot of that starts with the USA. And I just think like our system it's not doing things the right way. And so we talk about growth because like it's great on the TV, and we have more ratings and we have all these recognitions and we have more media around the tournaments and we have all these things, and that's what we talk about growth. But growth are more people playing and are they better and performing at an international stage. And I just pulled these numbers. We're not even back to pre-pandemic numbers yet. So more people, it is starting to tick up, like to catch up to where it was, but like it's not growing rapidly, softball. And we're not performing on the international stage in the way that we have before. And so I think like those are the things that you should be considering when you're like, is the structure right? And so it's telling you no. Like it's telling you no, and period. And so I think like we get in this weird bubble and we're like, it's great because like, look, Sally got recognized on Twitter and this game is televised, and isn't that amazing? And that's not what makes it amazing. It doesn't mean those things shouldn't exist, but that's not the measurement that we're talking about here, especially for 15 and 16-year-olds. And I just like, it's truly insane. I sometimes feel like when I'm talking to people, I'm like, what are we talking about? Like we are on a different planet. Like look at this kid next to you. What you and I are talking about right now is so off from what this kid is feeling. Like we've lost it. We've just lost it. And it's hard. I'm fully in it right now. Like I get it. I did all the tournaments this summer and there's a pressure in it but man, we're definitely off. And we're going to 20 colleges this fall to do assessments on pitchers, and I started gathering numbers on pitchers, and a lot of them have incoming freshmen that are hurt, a lot. And so I just think like it's the reality. If we can't see it, then we're closing our eyes. We're trying not to see it. So it's all there. It's not like, oh, is it good? Is it bad? Is it working? Is it not? Like, we know the answers to those questions. We are actively choosing to ignore them if we say that we don't know. And so I just think, like, yeah, it's just.
And while we won't stop, pushing conversation about performance and about, pitch design and the way we design our hitting training programs, we won't stop that, education and push. But in my opinion, I feel in my soul that the root of all of this is like, you've got to get a handle on health. You got to understand health. You have to recognize, as a leader of an organization, as a coach of a team, your role in protecting those kids. If you want them recruited, great. They need to be recruited and they need to get to their campuses healthy. And if you can't do that, I would question whether or not coaches should be recruiting from your program, because they can't show up to you on those campuses broken. And so that's sort of my charge to college coaches, is like, I think you should think very carefully about your incoming freshmen this year, who is coming in with any sense of understanding of their body, their own health. Whether or not they're healthy is a different story, but do they understand what it takes to manage themselves? And if they're coming from organizations and programs and schools and whatever that they don't, I would really think carefully about communicating with those programs in the future, because health is the root of performance. If you are not healthy, you cannot perform. And that's what they're expecting these kids to do.
Right. Well, and look what we see from, like, Simone Biles. She had a toxic youth culture and went on an international stage and mentally couldn't attend, Right. And I think, like, it is real. I see it more with my team. I know that because they are more honest with me. I mean, to be frank, they share those things, but, like, these are athletes. We need them to perform, yes, but to perform, they need to be well adjusted.
Yeah.
They need to come onto the college level and then ultimately the international level in a mental state that allows them to perform under high competition. Like, you think Caitlin Clark is going to perform on the stage right now that she's on if she doesn't have a mental fortitude that is out of control high? Like, I mean, and that we are not doing that. This stage is 100%, even the kids that make it out performance wise, because they can somehow and they're performing fine and they're healthy. Like, did we set them up to be well adjusted, mentally tough competitors at the next stage, and all that comes with, and all that comes with. And I think, I have a hard time imagining the answer to that is yes. I think college coaches are feeling it when you talk about the transfer portal, when you talk about the conversations that you're having with athletes, when they just don't understand it, the questions they're asking that seem off. Like, all of it feeds from this. It all feeds from this. And I think, like, I don't know.
I think it's an accountability thing. Laura, you're saying, like, travel ball coaches, you need to ensure their health. Not a single travel ball coach out there feels the responsibility. No. I don't want to overgeneralize, but there's no way that a single travel ball coach feels the responsibility of, like, it's up to me to keep that kid healthy. There's not a single one. So, but, like, whose job is it? It's on the athlete. Okay, Krista. Because you're a part of OGX. So, I mean, there's this world of, like, taking yourself out of being, I'm not knocking the coaches. Take yourself out of OGX. How could you do that? You don't have the ability to do that. You don't have the resources, the expertise. That isn't your responsibility. Right. Yes, it's your responsibility if someone reports pain to not throw them. Right. To listen and to make a decision on this. But beyond that, that can't be a coach's responsibility. So, like, whose responsibility is it? It goes back to the athlete and her family. You have to manage your own health. I'm going to pitch you to death. I'm going to run you ragged and do this. You have to manage that. This idea of, like, whose job is it to make sure that, like, they're mentally, that goes back on everyone puts it back on, like, the athlete and their families of, like, this is the system and you've got to figure out how to do it. I mean, I think the reality is that's true. That is the system. So what you're arguing, Krista, is that, like, then the system needs to shake. And from my standpoint, I'm like, well, in the moment, it's not. And so what we need to keep doing, it is on the athlete and their family. So, like, our job to the athletes and families that we have direct connections to is to keep educating them on how to do that and keep pointing them in the directions, whether it's within our own OGX team or other people on, like, mental health sides, things like that, to just keep them above water, because it's not on travel ball coaches, whether it should be or not. It's not on your standard pitching coach. Why would that be on a standard? I show up to a lesson once a week and it's up to her or him to make sure I'm physically. No one has the ability to do that. So it all falls through the cracks. That's why people are obviously, the system is, the demands are out of control and there's no one there. So I just think it is kind of coming full circle of, I agree. Should it be like that? No, but it is. And so in the meantime, the work that we do, I feel like it can be life-changing. It's life-changing. I mean, the amount of athletes that I think, I'll walk out of a debrief room and sometimes you guys know I'll say, like, I think we just saved that kid's career. Mm-hmm. Are we magic? Do we help every single person? Does everyone like turn into, something that they weren't? No, not every story is a fairy tale, but we help resurrect a lot of careers simply because we provide the resources that these kids desperately need in the system the way it is. So yeah, is it a prop to us? It is, because it's a service that is remarkable. It is necessary. Should it be necessary? Probably not, but it is. So I think there's two ways to look at that. And I think right now our job at the very least is just to keep educating our athletes, the families, continuing to put things like this out there to make sure that people who are not currently directly connected with us and being overseen by us at least starts to plant some seeds. Like, yeah, I do have to help my daughter and give her some more resources in order to do this. If, your average family is not changing the system, so they need the resources around them to help her stay afloat.
Yep. For sure. All right, we're going to go into our question really quick. This is kind of on topic, I think, a little bit. This is from Coach Kris Ganeff from Notre Dame, the new Notre Dame head coach. So I'm going to play it, and then we will answer.
Being a parent of 2 teenagers and a coach of 18 to 22-year-olds, we constantly hear how hard things are and that we don't understand how hard this is or that is. I have a theory, but would love your thoughts on the differences between hard versus challenging. Thank you.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
It's a really good
like
question.
I think from my experience, this goes so much to the topic of what it really is related to what we're talking about, which is when you're in this like vortex of travel ball, it is only expected. People lose perspective. I mean, it is the reality. I've not been, this is my 20th year coaching, which is ridiculous. And I've not had a year where I've thought like, everyone really kept perspective all year. Like, I just think, and me included, sometimes I'll there was like a game last week that I like was talking to Josh and I was like, what the hell am I talking about? Like I am in the vortex. So I think that it becomes, I referenced this to Ashley yesterday, but the amount of conversations I've had with parents, and again, this is not a knock on the parents, like I get it, but where they've said like, you just don't understand the impact this is having on my daughter. Like we're really, she's really struggling, or we're really worried about it on things like playing time, performance, recruiting, and I think, I think I said what I said to Ashley is that sometimes when parents say that, I want to say it's not what's happening to her that's the problem with the statement you're making. It's not that she's not getting recruited. It's not that she's not having the playing time she wants. It's the problem is that the response we've created is so extreme to those things that are hard, instead of, and that's what I think of when I hear Chris's question, which is, these are just challenges. They're obstacles. That's life, and you can, and you are strong enough to come on the other side of it, whether you agree with what's happening to you, whether it feels unfair, whether you get hurt, there are circumstances outside your control, whatever it is, like you can overcome those. These are not the same as things that unravel people, like, losing loved ones, or, these things that are getting, having debilitating injury happen to yourself, like a really serious sickness or something, things that obviously are harder to overcome. These are just challenges and what they're supposed to. It doesn't mean they're not challenging, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't have a reaction to them or you shouldn't feel a certain type of emotion. You can feel all those things. But I definitely think that right now because we get so sucked into this world, and it's what we see on social media and it's what we see in everything, that we lose perspective on the things that are, as Kris says, challenging versus the things that are truly hard, if you want to look at it in the way she's looking at it. So I think that I definitely think that there's a difference in that. And I think, hopefully as parents and coaches, we can start to see our role as teaching kids to navigate through the challenging stuff by feeling the emotions they want to feel, but learning to be resilient in it and mature through it, and all of the skills they're going to need when those things become, I lost my job, I don't like my job, I am in a relationship I don't want to be in, I'm all of those things. That's what these things teach them to navigate, versus this is impossible and I'm so miserable and I've lost my whole identity and I can't function, which we see a lot. I think we see that more and more.
When I first heard the question, my immediate response is hard versus challenging in my mind is whether you feel equipped to make those decisions or to handle that scenario. Hard to me feels like, this is my own personal take, hard to me is I don't know that I can do this. I don't know that I've experienced this before, that I have the skill set, that I have the emotional fortitude or mental stability, whatever, to handle what is in front of me. Challenging is, I have support. I know this is going to be hard. I know that I have skills that may not be the most polished or the best, but I know how to and have a plan for getting through a difficult time. And that is where, again, I deal so much from the injury side that those decisions of giving up other sports, let me keep it in the athlete context, giving up other sports, deciding to skip a tournament to preserve your health, to focus on a bigger tournament the next weekend. Those are challenging scenarios. They are hard when you don't have a support system to help educate you, to help support you in those decisions, to give you resources, whether that is strength and conditioning advice, pitching advice, whatever our guidance is, to keep you feeling your best. It becomes hard when you don't know how to access any resources and don't even know who to go to or how to pull that together. Challenging is, I have it, I know it's going to be difficult, I know this is a hard decision, but I can see the other side of it and see why going through this is important to me. And there are some athletes who do not have access to things to help them be challenged or to see things as challenging. Everything is hard. And those are the ones that they're really challenging, they're challenging child-parent relationships to navigate sometimes for us, but they're also challenging with athletes fully buying in and trusting us and trusting themselves. And to me, that's the difference. Hard is no support, no guidance, they don't know how to ask for help. And challenging is, all right, I know I can do this. It's going to be hard, but I know I'm supported and I have to get through this and I have to work through it and just figure it out. And I know who to ask.
I think of A League of Their Own when Dottie Hinson says, it just got too hard. And I know it's a movie, but in the movie, being away from her family, not being with her husband, and the demands of the game just got too hard. And remember, Jimmy Dugan's response is, it's supposed to be hard. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. So I think there is this element of, you could say challenging, hard, but when we sign up for sport, it's not a right, it's a privilege. Sport will be challenging. It will be challenging. We have to accept that it will be challenging. Our daughters, our loved ones, ourselves, when we are in that experience, we are going to experience the highs of it. We're going to experience the lows, the deep losses, the losses that feel like the loss of a like a loved one, the deep cut, my whole career, was on the line, those devastating, that's a part of sport. I spent a season watching everyone else. This was supposed to be my year and I blew my ACL. Those things are a part of sport. So when we sign up, You sign up for all of it. You can't pick and choose. It'd be like marrying someone and saying, I only want those parts of you, but don't give me the others. You sign up for all of it. And so I think the reality is, going back to our other conversation, is that when you are so depleted as the adult in the situation, your job as the adult, whether it's the coach or the parents, is to help your child understand, like, this is what this game does. It rips you apart, but it spits you back out and you get another opportunity. You know, it will also deliver some of the best moments of your life. And so, like, we've got to be along for all of it. But if as the adult, you are so depleted in energy, in capacity, financially, that you are in the vortex, essentially, is what Krista's saying, that you no longer can see all of those things, we're in trouble. We're in trouble, because now all of a sudden we think that every time the game dishes out something challenging, we think this isn't the hard we should be having. No, it's exactly the hard that you should be going through. It's exactly the challenge that you signed up for on day one when you put that kid in T-ball, you know? So I think that that's the, like, loss of perspective we're talking about, is that, like, when we cross the line and take the basic challenges and adversities of the game that will get dished out to every single family and athlete who plays it, because it's the beauty of it. If you strip that out of it, you strip the beauty of the game, because then you no longer feel the highs, if that's all that exists. So I think we take the basic challenges and adversities and we pretend as if they're hard, when we stop accepting that they're a part of the ride, whether you want it or not. So that's my thought. And I do think this isn't just a, like, parents are doing it all wrong. I think there's a generational thing. There's a generational piece of parent involvement and wanting everything to be okay for their kids, instead of thinking like our job is to make them resilient and to keep their experiences, like, helping them grow, instead of just like, I want to make it okay for them. There is a generational element of that. But I also think, Krista, going all the way back to, like, these families are freaking depleted, and they do lose perspective when they're absolutely depleted. We all do. I think that all the time. If I get depleted in area A of my life, then I can feel myself snapping at this or not being a good version of myself as a mom. There's human element to that, of just, like, you know, I think it's all connected. So in summary, we need to take a step back and take a breath and keep the goals that we have for our kids, and keep making sure that essentially we know it's not all going to be perfect. You're going to play tired sometimes. You're going to have situations that are XYZ, but keeping it in somewhat of a check that we can continue to have the right perspective and keep passing that on to our kids as well.
Yeah. I'll leave it there. I think that's a good summary of what we said. I think we just got to keep having this conversation. I think keep talking through these. I think that question came from Kris for a reason, right? This is kind of what we were saying, which is we're all seeing it. We're all seeing the impacts. And so I think the more we can get, who are the parties involved that are impacted by this? Who are the parties involved that can start to navigate some change for the athletes? And I think, like, it really does matter. You know, this isn't like, oh, you know, it's as simple as, if we don't change the system, like, maybe Sally could have played at this level and she ended up here, or, you know, maybe this could have happened. Like, we're really talking about, you know, there's 2 million girls that play softball in the country, and, you know, so there's people impacted here. You know, this is a real thing, and our responsibility as adults is to protect our kids. And I think we need to be having the right conversation around what that looks like in softball. I think it's, you know, when I do this a lot now, it's not easy because I'm also depleted, but I think when I have to have conversations with families now, you know, Josh, my assistant coach, and I, a lot of times I'll say, like, just don't lose perspective of this family is also going through it, you know, as you would say, Ashley, like, they're depleted for a variety of reasons. They have family stuff going on. They have this, and it doesn't mean that we're going to agree or I'm going to whatever at the end of the conversation, but I think we're all kind of going through a lot together. But I think at the end of the day, when we for me, it's what's kept me, you know, this is my last year coaching travel ball, but it's what's made it so hard for me to walk away. Ultimately, I have to do it for my kids, but is that when I look at the kids, I feel like we're failing them, and that's reality. Like, I just feel like, you know, when I see the impact that this game is having on these girls, there are moments that are amazing. Obviously, we see girls blossom into strong women. We see, these they surprise themselves with what they're capable of doing. There's so many good, amazing things that still come out of it. But there's so many times where I go talk to a girl and she's trembling out there, where I see an athlete who's legitimately starts having panic attacks because recruiting's not going the way that she thinks it should be going. That we see all kinds of things. We see people making choices health wise that are almost unbelievable. What they're putting a child's body through because they think it's necessary. And I just feel like that's our responsibility as the adults in this. And if that's not what's leading our decisions, I mean, I've said this before, but then the system needs regulated, because if we can't do it ourselves, these are kids. And so there's an element of, you said before, Ashley, like some of the decisions feel like child abuse, and there's a reality to that. We're required to protect kids. They can't do these things alone. They are in a system created by adults, and if the system can't do that, or the people in it aren't willing to put that as the priority, then someone has to. There has to be some regulations on it. So that's real. I mean, I feel that really deep in my core a lot. When I see the things that we see these athletes go through, when I look in their face, what they come back with me, how many times, not to say that you shouldn't have emotions, but how many tears, these girls feel. And it's just it's not like I'm sad or, I got hurt and I'm crying. Those are expected, but just like it's at the brim all the time. You go out to do a timeout in a game and you could see tears in their eyes. And I just think like, this is not it. This is not it. This is not what we're supposed to be doing here. So I just hope that we can all consider that and really talk about it, and not expect it to be on the athletes to do it, because that's ridiculous. Right. They're kids. So, right. All right. Well, that was kind of depressing. Sorry about that. But
totally. I was thinking like Daria style, man. Like MTV, just like Daria. Next week, let's bring it up a notch.
Yeah. On that note, though, what I did say to my team, because we're coming off Colorado, and I said, like, get the music. We have one of our injured athletes that's been, kind of helping in the dugout. I was like, get ready to DJ. Like, let's just use this weekend. We're at home for the most part. Some of my kids had to travel, but you can sleep in your own bed at the end of the night. Just like, let's freaking have a party this weekend. We need it. So that's what I'm going to go try to do for the next, 4 hours. Go create a party in the dugout, have some fun, not see tears in people's eyes, and maybe have some fun in the supple field would be ideal for me in this next few hours. So I'll report back next week how that goes. So, all right. Well, until next week, we will see you then.